And welcome to another edition of People in Politics. If you've not already done so, please subscribe to the show. I'd be very grateful. Joining me today's show is someone who's been very outspoken on a number of real controversial topics on immigration, on migration, on the health service, and who recently resigned from the Tory party to join Reform UK. Lee Anderson is seen by some as a controversial figure, but I really wanted to talk to him and spend some time with him and find out a bit more of what he thought. So, welcome to today's edition of People and Politics. Lee, thank you very much for giving up your time to do this. It's really nice to meet you and chat to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Lee, a few weeks ago, you stood on the podium with Richard Tice, just after you resigned from Conservatives, and you said you want your country back. What do you mean by that?
It's lots of things, David. Let's talk about education first. You know, I grew up in the 70s, went to school in the 70s and early 80s. Had a good school life, really. And I look at what's happened today in schools, and we see some of the woke ideology being taught in schools. We see drag artists going into schools, teaching, reading books to children, small children. I think that's inappropriate. So I want to see an end to that. We see the gender ideology being pushed in schools as well. I want to see an end to that. I believe that children should be children. Children will figure it out. They need to go to school to learn how to socialize with people, to learn how to read and write and get those life skills ready for when they leave school. Leave them alone. Leave our children alone. Like I say, David, they'll figure out who they are when they've grown up and become adults. They don't need confusing by a lot of do-gooders in school. And education is a big one for me. I'm very passionate about education, discipline in schools as well. We see a lot of schools now failing, especially in places like Ashfield. There's a lot of bad behaviour in schools where there seems to be a culture now where teachers don't want to sort that out. So when I say I want my country back, I want the schools to be good. I want the schools to be an environment like there was when I was growing up, probably when you was growing up, where education and children came first, and the so-called grown-ups ideology wasn't, and politics weren't involved in school. Now we can talk about healthcare if you want. Now I want to go back to a time when I say I want my country back. I want to live in a Great Britain where you could ring the doctor up at 8 o'clock in the morning and get an appointment that day. I want to live in a Great Britain where you have that operation booked for that knee replacement or hip replacement and it doesn't get cancelled 14 times. I want to be able to ring the dentist up if I've got a bad tooth and go and have that tooth taken out or fixed the same day, rather than waiting a month or going to the local DIY store and buying a pair of pliers to pull that tooth out myself. So when I say I want my country back, we had that a few years ago. And when I say I want my country back, sorry for ranting, David, but you've asked the wrong question here. I'll go on forever about this one. When I say my country back, I want my country back. I want us to control who comes into our country, both legally and illegally. The migrant crisis must stop, and we're letting far too many people in. 1.2 million we've got visas last year in the UK. We cannot cope with that amount of migration on a yearly basis. We simply cannot. My constituents are ringing me on a daily basis. They can't get a GP appointment. They can't get a doctor's appointment. And when I say I want my country back, I want all those things. Let's look at housing, David. Back in the 80s, if you wanted a council house in Ashfield, and it was the same around the country, you got the choice of 3 houses. You put your house on the waiting list. 2 weeks later, you get a call from the council. They say you've got 3 houses they want you to view. You go and pick the one that you want. Nowadays in Ashfield, if you put your name on the housing waiting list, you have literally 0 chance of getting a council house. 0 chance at all. You will not get one. That's a bona fide fact. So when I say I want my country back, it's those sort of things. We are a prosperous, rich nation. and there should be enough money to go around and make sure we've got world-class public services, and that our people shouldn't have to suffer and wait for stuff, and that British people, and this is not racist or bigoted, British people should come first. You know, I've paid taxes all my life in this country. My parents have, my grandparents did. You know, they fought in wars, my grandparents did, to make this country what it is. And I don't want to give our country away to a different way of life. I want it to be how it should be. That's a rich, prosperous, caring, loving nation. I want my country back. And it was like that.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. I hear that now. That's a good answer. But to go back to what you said, for example, I don't think there's many people in the country that would dispute with you. And everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants to be able to see a doctor the same day. Everybody wants to be able to get a house quickly. And everybody wants their children to have a good education. And that's how we get there. But I was wondering how you balance, for example, education. How do you balance education with the diversity that is now in our country? That whether you like it or not, it's here to stay. For example, as a disabled person, I would like children taught about disability and disabled people. So I think so would you agree you got to be careful with saying, well, we're going to teach children about these sorts of people, but we're not going to teach them about that sort of people. I'm asking, how do you find that balance?
Oh, yeah. Look, I think, I'm not going to have too much of a go, David, at schools, because I think in some respects schools have made things better in this day and age. Like, for example, I go to a lot of schools almost on a weekly basis, and we talk about disabled children. There seems to be, well, there are a lot more disabled children with SEN, with special education needs in mainstream school, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
I think it's a brilliant thing, because before, I remember when I went to school, there was no disabled children in my school. They went on a different bus to a different school.
Yeah.
Now, for some children, that is suitable. Who's got real challenges, real special needs. They need to go to a school where the teachers are specially trained, where the staff's specially trained, and it's a happy, safe environment. And I'm lucky to have two such colleges in my constituency, Portland Training College and Fountaindale College. Excellent places. One of them is residential as well, and these are doing wonderful work. But I think schools need to be more inclusive. But that shouldn't get rid of the fact that school is there for children to learn. Basically, school is there for children to learn to read and write and have a decent education and give them the life skills that they need ready for life in work. And I've done a little bit of work with the Downs community in Ashfield as well. I've always been quite vocal on, and it's something close to my heart as well, David. Down syndrome is, making sure that, and I've raised this in Parliament a few times, making sure that kids with Down syndrome or on the Downs spectrum, if you like, have that chance to succeed in life and be able to live independently. Because it wasn't that long ago, David, that people who were born with Down syndrome were sort of thrown on the scrap heap.
They were totally ghettoized. They went to special schools, special units, and I wouldn't like to go back to that for 1 minute. So I think it's great that children are being integrated into school, but I think if we're gonna integrate some children, we have to integrate everybody, and that includes people that maybe not from here or whatever. Would you agree on that?
I don't think we can integrate everybody, because there's always going to be some children or people that need real one-to-one care, one-to-one lessons, and that extra bit of support. And that has to be done in some of the special schools that we've got. And I think the first class, the ones that I've got, But on
Yeah,
the whole, yeah, people with SEN, special needs, Downs, if it's Downs, then yeah, put them into mainstream school. These children have got to learn to live independently. They've got to learn to socialise. And if we do that and don't treat them like, and I don't like to use this word, but sometimes we treat people like lepers, that you don't want to be near them, you don't want to touch them. That was just horrible.
yeah,
You know, I work closely with a cafe sometimes that employs, well, it's got voluntary staff who are SEN children and young people who go there 2 days a week to learn how to cook, how to clean, how to serve food, how to work in a restaurant type of thing. And this is a wonderful organisation, and it's good for the families as well. Gives them a little bit of respite, and it learns them. And we've got in young people now that go out into the workplace that before their family would have worried about them getting a job and integrating society, and you know, I hate the word normal as well sometimes. We use the word normal too much, but people just want to be like everybody else, you
yeah,
know,
of course.
and
Yeah,
they want the
yeah.
same opportunities and be able to do the same things and have that little bit of money in your pocket at the end of the week, go and buy some nice things, and that's what we want, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, of course. I think everybody wants that. And as you said earlier, everybody wants to be able to phone the doctor in the morning,
Yeah,
get an appointment the same day, not wait 9 months or years
yeah,
for an appointment.
yeah.
How are you gonna achieve that if you bring migration down to zero?
Well, migration solves a lot of problems, David. For me, if you cap migration or control it, so we've not got 1.2, 1.3 million people coming in a year. You know, a sort of that sort of starts to affect everything. It affects pressure on public services. It affects the health service. It brings the demand down on the health service, on housing, on crime, on police, on prison places, everything.
Yeah, but I think I'm right in saying that the Reform Party are saying that they want to cut migration to next to nothing. So how are we going to balance the needs of the health service
Yeah.
and the
It's
economy?
quite simple. It's quite simple,
Protect
David. It's
people.
quite simple. We have over 5 million people in this country economically inactive. We have over 6 million people that's on in work benefits. We have I think it's 1.5 million on the dole at the moment. The labour force is there. It's far too attractive for people to sit at home in some cases or work part time and have their wages topped up by universal credit. We have to make sure that people are better off by being in work than not being in work or working part time. That's how you fill the labour market shortage.
But unfortunately, that's not always the case because I think something like 69% of the people who are really on the breadline or are in poverty are on universal credit.
Yeah.
So and they're working already. So if we need so we'd have to raise the minimum wage substantially
Yeah.
before we can take people off.
Well, the minimum wage, David, has just gone up to, or the living wage has gone up to over £11 an hour. So that's a record level. But you mean you say if you increase, I deal with small businesses every week, and I know the Labour Party were calling for a minimum wage of £15 an hour at one time, I think it was. Now I talk to the pubs and shops and restaurants and cafes in my area. If the minimum wage went up to £15, they would close.
Yeah,
Every single one would close. Is
yeah.
that what you want?
No, I'm saying it's a difficulty because
Well, we've always had a situation here, David. I mean, back in the day when I was first starting work, when I was struggling, I had 3 jobs. You
right,
know, I used to work Saturday and Sunday and work overtime in the week, and that's what people traditionally did. They worked longer hours and then got a qualification and then got a better job. So, I mean, that is the way out of poverty is through work.
yeah.
You know, the minimum wage thing. I understand what you're saying, but that would cause more problems than it would solve because all my pubs in Ashfield would close.
Yeah, that's true. But I hear what you're saying. But do you recognize at the same time that for some people, work is not possible, or
Yes.
so a lot of disabled.
No. I want to push back on there slightly, David.
There's a lot of disabled people that find it really difficult to get work because it's a well-known fact that disabled people like myself want to work, but find
Yeah.
it really hard to get the opportunity.
Yeah, well, I'll say this to you, David. I don't agree that some people can't work. I think everybody can do something, unless you really, really, if you're bedridden, then obviously you can't. But there's a lot of people out there who I think has been let down by society. We just throw in the scrap heap and we say, "You've got this disability, so you're not worthy." I don't agree with that. And if you can pay, say, a disabled person, I don't know, 25 grand a year from the state, which with rent and council tax and disability benefits and carers allowance and other bits and bobs that some disabled people get, not all. If a country can afford to pay them 25 grand a year, what I would say to that is we should be supporting that person in the workplace 2 or 3 days a week with the proper training, proper mentoring, and help that person get out of the house and feel like they're contributing towards society. Because you're quite right what you say, David. A lot of these disabled people want to work, but there's not the support in place. Now, an interesting statistic is just after the Second World War, I think in 1948, there was something like 95% of disabled people was in the workplace. I mean, a lot of that was due to the fact that we'd just come out of a war. There were a lot of men that didn't come back, but the country was different then. They supported people to get out, and they did a wonderful job. And I think to myself, my goodness, we've gone backwards in time. There's lots of disabled people out there that want to work, but they need to have that support in place to help them do it, and the financial support as well.
Yeah, I completely agree that it would be good to have more support for disabled
Yeah.
people to work. But for example, out of the 5 million vacancies or however many vacancies that are available right now, I wonder what proportion of them are really suitable for a disabled person to do, because I would wager that if you look carefully at them, it'll be care work, it'll be retail, it'll be bar work, it'll be and that is not suitable for disabled people. And there was another thing came out recently, that I can't remember which minister it was, but she was really, really keen. I think it's Amber Trot, but it doesn't matter. She was really keen to see disabled people working from home, but during the pandemic, she was totally opposed to people working from home. So
Mm.
the number of vacancies that actually at the same people, it's tiny, it's really small.
So, what's your solution then, David?
I think that there should be more obligation on an employer to employ a certain proportion of disabled people.
So, I mean, back in the 90s, up until 1991, employers who had over 100 staff. They had a statutory duty to employ 1% of the workforce should have been disabled. Now I know this because when I worked down the pit, I worked for the coal board when I left school. Probably 1,000 men worked at each colliery in Notts in Nottinghamshire, and so therefore we had at least 10 people. We had more actually. People who were classed as disabled. Now, some of these disabled people were obviously men that had horrific accidents in the coal mine, but
Mhm.
some were also people out the local village who'd got disabilities, and we brought them into They didn't go underground; they stopped on the surface, and they did jobs that they could do, and they was looked after, not by the workmates, but also by the community as well. So it was worthwhile. And yeah, I could go with something like that, 100%, hundred
Yeah.
percent.
You mentioned working in the mines, and this is not one to ask you about, Ian. This is changing the subject. Your dad was a miner, and you grew up and worked in the mines. You fought with Arthur Scargill back in the 80s, presumably against Thatcherism. And I was wondering how a boy goes from there to the deputy part of the deputy chairman. What's going wrong?
I think, growing up as a young man in a mining village, you got to remember this small village is very parochial. Everything evolves around the coal mine. All the men work there. And when you see the jobs and livelihoods of thousands of people being affected, then sometimes you have to make a stand. And I think that's what the miners did in 1984. They made a stand.
Quite right, so.
We saw the Conservative government, or Maggie at the time, as the evil, nasty Tories who wanted to close down the coal industry as payback for the 1972 and 1974 strikes, which brought down the Conservative government. And look, you go with it. You go with the flow. You're born into that. You're born into that sort of mentality. But then, we all on a journey throughout our lives. We witness and see different things. And I thought the Labour Party was the working class heroes, and Scargill was, but it wasn't. They, bearing in mind, David, I can remember going to see Scargill, Dennis Skinner, and Tony Bennett at Chesterfield Town Hall one Friday night when I was about 16 or 17 during the miners' strike. Absolutely brilliant. These people were the best speakers ever, and you would come out that building wanting to start the revolution. That you wanted to be, go and get rid of the nasty Tories. That's how it was. But then as you go through life, you get a job, you settle down, you get your mortgage, you have children. You start to see things in a different light. And I saw the Labour Party pretty much change a lot from being the party of the working man to being a sort of an Islington elitist sort of political party that were talking about Palestine rather than talking about poverty in Ashfield. When I was going to Labour group meetings, they were talking about things that were alien to me. I want to talk about job opportunities, schools, education, health service. They weren't talking about this stuff. They were talking about a lot of nonsense half the time. I'm thinking, my goodness. And, I sort of, when I was a Labour councillor and working for a Labour MP, I thought, well, this is not the party for me. I want to see young people in Ashfield have a good education. I want them to have good jobs. I want them to have a good future. I want our streets to be safe. I want our hospitals and GPs to be functioning. They weren't talking about this stuff. They were talking about, an ideology, this Corbyn stuff. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it. And I've spoke to my friends in the Conservative Party, who I was on the same council with, and I thought, my big thing in life, David, really is that you stand on your own 2 feet. You let the government make sure that you live in a safe society where there are opportunities available for you, but the rest is up to you. And the Labour Party don't believe in that. I believe this is a great country still, and if you want something bad enough, you can get it if society is fair to you. And that's always been the case. I think it still is the case, even though we can make things or improve things, but that's still the case. But I think we've got this culture now where people think that the state owes them a living, and it doesn't. If you want, like I was always brought up to by my parents, if you want nice things, if you want that holiday abroad, if you want that car, you go to work and you bloody earn it, because nobody else is going to give it you.
No, I see where you come from, but I was about to ask you, I'm thinking, do you really think the Conservative Party are the party of the working man and poverty? Because since they've come into power in 2010, poverty has just gone up and up and up. And a number of people living in relative poverty now is higher than ever.
That's simply not true, David. It's simply not true. I mean, I worked for Citizens Advice Bureau for many, many years, and the way they measure poverty in this country is not like they measure poverty in other countries. Go to one of the African countries or in India or Pakistan. Look at some real poverty. I was in South America last year. That was real poverty. Now, there's more people in work in this country now than there's ever been. There's more opportunities. There's more jobs. There's more training courses. There's more skills. So, I mean, what do you class as poverty? I mean, I think one of the descriptors now of poverty is if you don't have the internet or you don't go on a holiday once a year. That's one of the descriptors used in when you calculate poverty. So, yes, there are people struggling in this country. I know that. I'm not that ignorant or naive. But poverty, real poverty, yeah, go to some countries that are really impoverished. then the way out of poverty, David, is through work, is through education, through training, through working.
Yeah, I agree. I just think people find it really hard to get work, and that's the difficulty. And when they do get work, for example, the gig economy is so unstable,
Yes, it is.
and that's not fair, and that needs to be changed. Another thing that I want to ask you is the Reform Party said they're gonna reform the economy and stop wasting tax.
Yeah.
Where are they going to cut tax right now? Because in order to cut taxes, you have to cut back on spending. So where are they going to cut spending?
Well, we need to cut spending by a lot, David. I see, as first-hand being a councillor for many years, the waste in local authorities, in councils, in district councils, and county councils. There, we are wasting literally hundreds of millions of pounds a year. Health tourism is a cripple for us, about £300 million a year. People just jumping on a plane and coming here and getting an operation that's never paid into the system. We could sort that out straight away. Again, migration. Illegal migration is costing us what, £3 or £4 billion a year. And foreign aid, we need to, cut that back and spend that money in this country. But I mean, Reform Party is saying we should save £5 in every 100. I agree with that. There is lots of waste. The health service is actually spaffing money up against the wall on a daily basis. I see it. I have a lot to do with my local trust. My local hospital was built on a PFI deal signed for by Brown and Blair. My hospital costs £1 million a week on the repayments. It's going to cost £3 billion to repay for an hospital which should have cost £250 million. There's your answer. We're just chucking money away.
Yeah, we're chucking it away. But do you think, do they stop in the small boats or change it up? Because the people coming over, and we've spent hours and hours of parliamentary time on small boats, but add that to the most tiny amount of people, really tiny amount of really desperate people.
They're not desperate though, David. If they're that desperate, they would claim asylum in France.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I've been to Calais, I've been to the camps, I spoke to the migrants who were economic migrants. They told me they was coming because England is El Dorado.
Yeah, but it's not good. And of course they put on the barge, and you famously said that if they don't like it, they can fuck off back to France. When you said that, did you ever think Richie Sunak might tell you to fuck off eventually because you were party chairman or
Well, no, I mean it was this was in response to the illegal migrants refusing to go on the Bibi Stockholm ferry, if you like, the barge. Bear in mind, this barge had just been used by oil workers, British oil workers, to sleep on. And I thought, well, if it's good enough for our own British workers to sleep on, it's good enough for migrants. And the comment I made was to a reporter as I was passing. I didn't think that he would actually put it in the paper, but he did. I said, yeah, they should F off back to France if they don't like it here. And I stick by, they should do. This is taxpayers' money, it's costing a fortune. But it was put in the paper and it went sort of viral. And you know what, David? I had thousands of emails of support over that comment.
Yeah, I imagine so. I imagine so. And we have to get a grip on immigration. And so going into the general election campaign that's to come, hopefully sooner rather than later, what's the big message of reform going to be?
It's going to be hope, giving people hope for the country. We want our country back, which I explained to you earlier, which is a bit more, I gave it in a bit more detail than the normal headlines. But we have to remind people, David, that this country of ours has been a gift to the world. We have given the world lots of stuff over centuries, whether that be the Industrial Revolution, railways, steam, technology, medicines, art, culture, vaccinations, sports like football, rugby, cricket, tennis, golf, architecture, penicillin, everywhere you look around the world, there's something of Great Britain in them countries. And we need to remind ourselves that we are a great country, that we always punched above our weight, and we can be that country again. But the current trajectory we're on, that's not happening. We need to look after our own, make sure that we've got brilliant schools, health services, GPs, dentists, infrastructure, a good defence system, good police force, prison service, all of that, and be the envy of the world. And I think the Reform Party, when we say we want our country back, or let's make Britain great again, that's what we're talking about. We need to, learn the lessons from history, that we have always punched above our weight in this country, and we can be exactly who we want to be.
Yeah, well, let's hope we can do better in the future, because it's been a pretty miserable few years. That there's dying days of this Conservative government. So let's hope it gets better in the future. Yeah. So Emily, it's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Deb. It's been lovely speaking to you.
I'm very grateful for your time, and thank you very much.
Yeah, and good luck with everything you're doing.
Yeah, thanks. So.